The serpent's debt, the endless burden of forgetting. Friends, pull your seats even closer now, and let the wind carry the scent of salt and regret into your ears. This story, the true story, began long before the gold. It began with a choice, a whisper of ambition that drowned out the wisdom of 1,000 years. Ekon, our home, was once a place where the Atlantic's roar and the river's whisper lived in harmony. But in those days, the harmony was failing. The Atlantic, with its ships and its massive nets, was loud, demanding, and profitable. The Nana bosom, the river god, was quiet, slow, and forgotten. The river had become a stagnant swamp, smelling faintly of mineral dust and the community's collective apathy. The very sound of the ocean, so loud and constant, had become a metaphor for the quick, easy path to wealth, distracting everyone from the hard, slow work of upholding tradition. 5 years before the terrible debt was paid, Abeiku was newly engaged to Akua. He was immense in strength, his muscles taut as ship cables, but his family was poor, and the shame of potential failure drove him to seek a hasty success. He had no patience for the slow, ancestral growth. He found old Kojo, the elder who spoke with the spirits, at the river's edge, tracing strange, fading symbols in the mud, symbols that looked like the roots of old mangrove trees. Kojo, wise one. I am to marry Akua. I need a blessing that will bring me lasting success. Tell me, should I focus my trade entirely on the deep-sea trawling, where the profit is great and the rewards are fast? Abeiku asked, his voice like that of an impatient man. Kojo did not look at him. His eyes, though clouded with age, seemed to be gazing into the dark, thick current of the Nana bosom itself. He picked up 2 stones from the confluence, a sharp, white quartz from the sea, and a smooth, dark river pebble worn round by time. Kojo's voice was low, slow and steady, like water running over rocks. Abeiku, you are a man of the loud. The sea brings riches, but it is fickle, demanding constant renewal and constant noise. The river brings life, but it demands remembrance. The path you seek, the path of the sea's loud prophet, leads through the silent pool of the Nana bosom. If you ever seek sudden, unnatural wealth, you will pass that way. Kojo's hand trembled slightly as he placed the white quartz stone on the ground, pointing toward the overgrown mangroves. If you take that path, the Nana bosom will not demand your death. He will demand your connection to your history. You will lose the names of things, the names of your ancestors, the meaning of your own name, the names of your craft, and the names of your sacred places. Your prosperity will be built on a foundation of forgetting, and a man without names is no man at all. Abeiku chuckled nervously, shifting from foot to foot. Forgetfulness? I am a strong man, Kojo. I work hard. I do not need magic pools. He failed to grasp the terrifying subtlety of the curse. Kojo simply handed Abeiku the dark river pebble. Keep the river stone. Remember this, the price of the sea's quick coin is the death of the river's slow memory. Abeiku nodded, he put the river stone in his pocket, and promptly dismissed the specific warning. He spent the next 5 years chasing the loud prophet, ignoring the old methods, until the sea finally mocked him. Friends, this is the tragedy. The warning was clear, yet Abeiku, like so many in our modern world, chose ambition over wisdom. Do you recognize this struggle in your own life? Leave a comment below telling me if you think Abeiku could have avoided his fate. The reckoning came 5 years later. Abeiku's nets were empty, his reputation shattered. The harvest moon deadline was 2 moons away. The shame was a physical knot in his gut. He found Akua in their small, smoky hut, stirring a thin meal. Abeiku, his voice raw with humiliation. Akua, I am ashamed to you. Nana ya buys silver with 1 cast. I am selling my dignity for 3 tiny fish. It is not a curse, Abeiku. It is the world. But the world, my husband, demands patience, and patience does not buy the flower. Akua said, patting her husband to be on the back. He pulled the cold, smooth river pebble from his pocket. He stared at it, the single, tangible reminder of Kojo's forgotten advice. For a desperate second, he considered seeking Kojo, seeking the quiet. But the pressure, the rich city rival, the deadline, the weight of his male failure, was too immense. He pulled back his arm and, with a guttural cry of defiance and despair, threw the dark river pebble violently into the roaring Atlantic. I need quick answers, not old stones. He grabbed his net and plunged toward the dark, stagnant mangroves, the place of the forbidden silence. The environment in the mangroves was a transition from the world of humans to the world of the spirits. The roar of the Atlantic, the sound of human commerce, died instantly. The sunlight was replaced by a cold, dense emerald light. He could smell not just decay, but a sharp, metallic odor, the smell of trapped mineral power, of something ancient and charged. He found the pool, circular, black, and unnaturally cold. The water was so thick it seemed to breathe. He cast his net. When he hauled it back, his muscles screaming, it was filled with massive, raw gold nuggets. Then came the first, immediate shock. He heard a small, startled gasp. It was Kofi, a young boy from the village, gathering reeds, frozen by the sight of the gold. Abeiku. What is that? You shouldn't be here. The elders say, Kofi said in a small trembling voice. Abaiku's fear was paralyzing. He rushed the boy, grabbing his arm with a fierce, shaking grip. You saw nothing, Kofi. Do you hear me? You tell no one you saw me here. He seized one of the heavy, cold black nuggets, the one that was coldest and damper than the rest, a visible piece of the river's heart. He shoved it into Kofi's hand. This is your silence. Now go. Go home and forget what you saw. Kofi scrambled away in terror, leaving Abeiku with the terrifying evidence and the heavy burden of a bribed, horrified witness. Abeiku was panting, his terror mixing with the chaotic joy of the gold. He looked back at the pool, certain he was safe. But then came the second, immediate shock. He heard the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps. Nanaya, the fisherman consumed by jealousy, stood at the edge of the gloom. Nanaya, whispering fiercely, his eyes wide with greedy excitement. Abeiku. I knew it. You found a silent pool. What is that metal? Is it the secret of the sea? Abaiku's fear was paralyzing. He rushed forward, blocking Nanaya's view of the pool's center. Abeiku, his voice raw, trying to appear masterful, it is a trade secret, Nanaya. A mineral deposit I found far inland. It is mine. You saw nothing. Leave now. Nanaya laughed, a short, nasty sound. Trade secret. I will wait, Abeiku. I will watch. And I will find this source. Nanaya retreated slowly, his eyes fixed on the pile of gold, a dangerous seed of suspicion planted in his mind. Abeiku waited until the sound of Nanaya's footsteps faded entirely. Only when the silence became absolute once more did he turn back to the pool. The gold lay shimmering, but now, emerging slowly from the thick, black water where the main nuggets rested, was the master of the silence. Curled tightly around the gold, its scales of polished brass humming with resonant energy, was the serpent. Its eyes were the terrifying, empty white of bleached bone, fixed on Abaiku's soul. A cold, dry voice echoed in Abaiku's skull. You took the gold under the eyes of your rival. Your ambition is louder than your fear. The silence must be absolute. You must never speak my name, Nana Bosom. If you utter the name, or if you tell your wife the source, I will claim every single memory of your history. Abeiku sealed the pact, trembling violently. He chose the quick wealth. Friends, the dead is now sealed with 2 witnesses. One child, Kofi, holds a piece of cursed gold. One rival, Nanaya, holds a dangerous suspicion. If the chilling suspense of this pact has you gripped, please subscribe to the channel right now, and ring that notification bell. We have so much more of this dark story to tell. Abeiku stumbled out of the mangroves, the oppressive silence replaced by the familiar, yet now mocking, roar of the Atlantic. His body was shaking, his mind reeling from the cold, violent demand of the serpent. He was rich, safe from poverty, but condemned to absolute silence. The weight of the raw gold nuggets in his bag felt less like wealth and more like cold, heavy stones of dread. His first task was secrecy. He spent the entire night hiding the gold, burying the largest nuggets in 5 separate, remote spots inland, far from any water source, a desperate, futile attempt to sever the link to the Nana bosom. He kept only a handful of the smaller pieces. The next morning, Abeiku walked into the market, not with fish, but with a calculated, confident swagger he hadn't possessed in years. He didn't offer gold, he offered cash from a source he vaguely alluded to as a successful, secret salvage operation near a distant island, a lie too bold for anyone to instantly question. He went straight to the best fabric merchant, buying yards of rich, imported silk, a cloth only the wealthy could afford. Then, he bought livestock, fine gourds, and jars of the rarest palm wine. Abeiku, speaking loudly, smiling broadly. Tell Elder Adolfo that Abeiku is coming. Tell him that the sea, finally, has been generous. The bride price will not just be paid, it will be honored. The reaction in Econ was a tidal wave of shock, envy, and suspicion. How could a man who brought in 3 fish last week now buy up half the market? Nana Ya, the jealous rival, was the loudest voice of suspicion. He stood by the market stalls, his eyes narrow, watching Abeiku with venomous focus. Nana Ya, whispering loudly to anyone who would listen. Salvage operation. Lies. No ship is salvaged that quickly. He broke a promise to the ocean, or worse, he made a pact with the land spirits. That wealth smells wrong. But the majority of the villagers, tired of the drought of money, believed the miracle. Abeiku's lavish spending was a distraction from their own woes. They whispered, maybe Abeiku simply has the luck of a new god. The collective desire for easy prosperity was Abeiku's greatest shield. The bride price payment was transformed from a private transaction into the most spectacular public event Econ had seen in years. Abeiku laid out the payment with a flourish, not just the required goods, but goods piled high, 10 massive yams when 5 were required, a cow instead of a goat, and a massive chest filled not with currency, but with smaller, rough nuggets of the cursed gold, interspersed with fine, legal silver. Elder Adolfo, a man who valued dignity over wealth, was visibly moved by the sheer abundance. Adolfo, addressing the crowd, with his voice filled with pride and relief. My daughter is honored. Abeiku has shown that his spirit is strong and his ambition is blessed. The shame is lifted. Let the wedding proceed. The ceremony itself was a celebration of excess. Akua was dressed in the finest silk, radiating love and relief. But even amidst the joy, a chilling sense of unease began to settle over her. Akua noticed the change in Abeiku was too sudden, too absolute. He was frantic, not joyful. He laughed too loudly, drank too deeply, and his eyes never settled on any one thing for long. She caught his gaze once, across the dancing, celebrating crowd, and saw not the deep love she knew, but a profound, cold terror, quickly masked by a manic smile. That night, alone in their new, magnificent hut, the truth surfaced. Akua, softly and gently. Abeiku, my husband. I am so happy. But tell me, truly. What was the name of the ship you salvaged? So I may tell my grandchildren the true source of their fortune. Abeiku froze. His mind, already under the serpent's influence, offered a sickening blankness. The lie he had told, the name of the fictitious ship, the location of the salvage, was gone, consumed by the silence before it even became a true memory. Abeiku, his voice harsh, strained, filled with sudden panic. It was just a small vessel, Akua. An old, forgotten route. It doesn't matter. Why are you asking? Why are you questioning our blessing? Akua looked at him, her relief instantly shattering. This was not the man of patience and honesty she had married. His panic was real. And in her heart, the first cold seed of suspicion, stronger than any gold, was planted. Abeiku had paid the bride price with gold, but the curse demanded continuous payment in memory. The agony was not a sudden fever, but a slow, systematic decay of his very self, exactly as the prophecy had warned, the loss of the names of things. It started small, with the language of his craft. He sat in his magnificent new house, surrounded by the scent of fresh wood and prosperity, yet he couldn't name the simple fisherman's handshake knot. He knew the motions, his hands moved with instinct, but the word itself, the history, the tradition, was a blank, terrifying void. When a trader mentioned the route to the Toddy Lighthouse, a coastal landmark he'd known since childhood, Abeiku's mind offered only a swirling fog where the memory should have been. The terror reached a chilling peak when it touched his family. One evening, Akua showed him a faded, hand-carved piece of wood, a small statue of his father. "Your father, Abeiku. The kind eyes, the strong jaw. Tell me the last story he told you about the great storm of '89. Abeiku stared at the carving, trying desperately to summon the image. He knew he loved the man, he knew he respected the face, but the memory, the voice, the story, the specific details, were gone. Abiku's voice was thin, a terrified whisper. I remember the feeling of his presence, Akua. The warmth of his hand. But the stories? The face? It is gone. The name of the moment, the knowledge of his life, it is all gone. He was losing the anchors to his past. The horror intensified when he sat alone, trying to write his own name, Abeiku. He could form the letters, but the meaning, born on Thursday, was utterly erased. He was becoming a man without a name, a man without a history. Akua watched the decay with a grief deeper than poverty. Her love was turning into a profound suspicion. When she brought out the blue beads, the symbol of their cherished history, Abeiku stared at them, confused. Abeiku shouted, he was terrified. "Stop haunting me with these old stones. It is stress. I am a businessman now. I will buy you new ones." Akua's tears dried. She knew this was not stress. This was spiritual affliction. Friends, the horror is no longer just about gold, it's about losing your very soul. Imagine looking at the person you love and having no memory of why. If your heart aches for Akua and Abeiku, leave a comment with a single word describing this feeling. We must know we are not alone in this profound sadness. While Abeiku suffered the agony of internal erosion, the serpent's curse was physically manifesting through the witness, Kofi. The heavy black nugget Abeiku had given him was not mere gold, it was a concentrated piece of the Nana Bosom's stolen treasure, a carrier of the curse. Kofi could not drop it or hide it, the nugget felt magnetically fixed to his trembling palm, always cold, always damp. The corruption was visible and terrifying. The nugget began to ooze a fine, brackish water, staining Kofi's hands permanently black. Soon, tiny, metallic, brass-colored scales, the telltale residue of the serpent, began to grow on the gold surface, reflecting the faint, cold green light of the mangroves. Kofi was wasting away, driven mad by paranoia, refusing to eat. He was confined to his hut, whispering endlessly about the serpent's white, empty eyes, and the sound of the river god's silent complaint. Akua, armed with old Kojo's warning about the serpent's residue, became a silent investigator in her own home. She began finding the brass scales, small, cold, and impossibly hard, near the water pot and their sleeping mat. The horror was now sharing her bed. She knew Kofi was telling the truth. The spiritual sickness was spilling out into the world. The tension was reaching a breaking point. Nana Ya, the jealous rival, fueled by the sight of Abeiku's success, became obsessed with finding the black nugget, believing it held the key to Abeiku's power, not the curse. One terrifying night, Nana Ya, driven by consuming avarice, crept to Kofi's hut. He didn't find the nugget. Kofi, in his delirium, had secreted it away in his mouth, but he heard the young man's final, desperate, terrified whisper through the walls. It steals the names of things. The words are gone. It is Nana Bosom. Kofi screamed, his voice barely audible. Nana Ya stumbled back, his face pale. He had heard the forbidden name, and though he couldn't place the context, he knew it was the root of the terror. He fled, not with the gold, but with the deadliest weapon of all, the forbidden name. The curse is spreading like a plague. Kofi is dying, and Nana Ya holds the forbidden name. This story is only getting darker. If you feel the chill of the serpent scales, please subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss the climax of this terrifying debt. The failure to remember, the brass residue, and the terrifying plight of Kofi forced the elders to act. They decreed the right of the first fisherman, a desperate measure to confirm Abeiku's spiritual standing. The rite became a massive, tense public spectacle at the shore. The village gathered in hushed silence. Chief Odom, a man burdened by tradition, presided. The elders chanted, and Abeiku, dressed in sacred white cloth, raised the mask of the first fisherman, a sacred, water-worn wooden heirloom that represented the collective memory and discipline of the clan. As Abeiku raised the mask, it began to vibrate violently. The chanting of the elders wavered. Abeiku cried out, his hands smoking from the supernatural heat emanating from the ancestral wood. Abeiku, gasping, dropping the mask. The heat. The wood is burning me. I cannot touch it. The mask fell into the sand, rejecting him utterly. The collective gasp of the crowd was a physical wave of condemnation that hit Abeiku like a stone. Nana Ya, shouting from the crowd, his voice venomous, the ancestors refuse him. He is spiritually unclean. His wealth is cursed. He has broken an oath to the land. The chief's face was grave. This was not a business failure, this was a public rejection by the spirits. The elders demanded a full spiritual inquiry. Abeiku, using his fading, but still present, political memory, fought back with calculated logic. He argued the rejection was due to the weight of his new, complex international dealings, a modern excuse for an ancient crime. His quick thinking delayed the verdict, but the seed of doubt, watered by the serpent's curse, was growing into a towering tree of communal fear. The community was now split, those who believed Abeiku's wealth was a modern triumph, and those who believed his spiritual emptiness was a curse. The stage was set for the final, devastating collapse. Abeiku had won the trial, but the victory tasted of ash. He had saved his social standing, but the spiritual debt was deepening, and the silence was consuming him at an alarming rate. That night, sitting beside Akua, he tried to recall the simple sound of her laugh, the specific, high, joyful sound she made when he tickled their child's cradle. The sound was gone. He could hear laughter, but not hers. It was replaced by a hollow echo, the terrifying emptiness where his most cherished memories once lived. "You are cold, Abeiku," Akua whispered, touching his cheek. "Even with the new house, you are cold." "I am planning," he lied, his voice thin. "The cost of business is worrying." The truth was, the cost was his soul, and the serpent's scales were now visibly growing on the outside world. The young witness, Kofi, was locked in his hut, consumed by the curse. The heavy black nugget ash was now weeping a fine, brackish water, had become one with him. The brass-colored scales were no longer just on the gold, they were spreading across Kofi's skin, starting at his hands and moving up his forearms, cold and metallic. He was writhing in the straw, his eyes wide with delirium, the fever of the Nana Bosom's stolen power burning him alive. He was dying, not of fever, but of a spiritual overdose. The nugget, that cursed chunk of the river god's core, was too much for a human vessel. In his final moments of lucidity, Kofi knew the serpent would claim him. He knew the gold had to be hidden or destroyed. With a desperate, choking effort, he swallowed the brass-scaled nugget whole, a final, futile attempt to silence the evidence that was consuming him from the inside out. He collapsed, his mouth twisted in a final, agonizing gasp. The witness was gone, his secret buried within his corrupted body. But Kofi's silence came too late. Nana Ya, the rival, was driven mad by greed and suspicion. He believed the secret to Abeiku's success lay within that nugget, and he was determined to seize it. Armed with a rusty machete and a heart full of venom, he crept to Kofi's hut under the cover of the midnight moon. He broke the latch, rushing inside. He found Kofi's body, still, scaled, and terrifyingly cold, but the black nugget was gone. Frantically, Nana Ya searched the straw, the corners, and the water pots. Nothing. He turned back to Kofi's lifeless body, shaking it in a fit of desperate greed. "Where is it, boy? Where is the quiet gold?" As he shook the body, a chilling, final exhale escaped Kofi's lips. The whisper was slurred, but Nana Ya, listening with the keen ear of obsession, understood the sound perfectly, though he lacked the context of its terror. The name of the silence, is Nana Bosom. Kofi said in a last whisper, a thin, rasping sound. Nana Ya stumbled back, not in fear of the curse, but in exultation. Nana Bosom. He thought the dying boy had given him the ultimate spell, the key to accessing the same supernatural wealth Abeiku had found. He smeared the brine from Kofi's hands onto his own face, believing he was absorbing power. He fled, convinced he now possessed the weapon to unseat his rival. Abeiku had managed to keep the serpent's name silent in the council, but now, his jealous rival held it, ready to unleash it upon the village like a poison. The spiritual debt was no longer a secret, it was a contagion. The atmosphere in Econ was heavy, not just with fear, but with an unnatural, cloying stillness. Abeiku's public rejection by the ancestral mask had unsettled the community's foundation, and Kofi's horrifying, scaled death had cemented the fear of a lurking spiritual sickness. On the day Akua went into labor, the heat became unbearable. It was not the usual tropical warmth, it was a dry, consuming heat that seemed to suck the moisture from the very air, leaving a strange, metallic taste on the tongue, reminiscent of the smell Abeiku recalled from the mangrove pool. Akua labored in agony, and the final push brought forth their son. The midwife, Mania, a woman hardened by decades of births, let out a scream that tore through the stifling heat. She dropped the birthing cloth and stumbled back, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Kwaku was beautiful, but his skin was unnaturally cold, and covered in a fine, iridescent, brass-colored texture. The scales were a subtle, terrifying truth, like the skin of a fish polished to the metallic sheen of the cursed gold. Mania, screaming, her voice choked with primal terror, the mark. The river god's mark. It is here. The child is touched. Akua, despite her exhaustion, saw the terror in Mania's eyes and the strange, metallic gleam on her son's skin. The scales confirmed every fear, every lost memory, every whispered suspicion. In that very same moment, the exact second Kwaku drew his first, rattling breath, the earth gave a deep, shuddering groan. Outside the hut, the disaster was instantaneous and absolute. The great drought arrived. The communal wells cracked open, not gradually, but in a single, devastating split. The water vanished, leaving only dust and the smell of hot, dry stone. The Nana bosom, already stagnant, became a gaping, cracked basin of dry mud. The small thread of water that still sustained the mangrove roots disappeared entirely. The synchronicity was impossible to ignore. The birth of the cursed child, the death of Kofi, and the complete failure of the water, it was the river god's punishment, perfectly aligned. The chiefs' council gathered, panicked. Their fear was no longer abstract. The spiritual conflict had become a matter of survival. They had rejected Kofi, they had accepted Abeiku's modern excuses, and the spirits had now delivered an undeniable, collective judgment. The village, bound by its dependence on the Nana bosom, was facing certain death. Chief Odom, gazing at the massive, dusty fissure that had been the main well, realized that the time for trials and political maneuvering was over. The price for the great forgetting had been presented. The council, shattered by the absolute drought, had one final, desperate option, the final rain dance. It was a sacred, hours-long ritual requiring total spiritual purity and concentration, a plea to the sky god and the sea mother to override the local, punitive deity. The elders and the remaining loyal villagers gathered at the cracked, muddy basin of the Nana bosom. They danced for hours under the relentless, punishing sun, their sweat steaming in the dry air. The air was so thick and hot it felt like breathing sand. As the elders reached the climax of the dance, chanting the ancient words of supplication, the ground beneath the black pool began to tremble. It was not the gentle tremor of a gathering cloud. It was a violent, grinding shudder that ripped a new fissure through the baked earth. The black pool at the center of the Nana bosom did not weep water. It spewed forth a thick, oily effluent, a sludge of brass-colored oil that bubbled and hissed, smelling of decay, trapped sulfur, and metal. The oil flowed onto the sacred dancing ground, burning the exposed skin of the elders, forcing them to retreat in agonizing pain. The serpent had violently rejected their appeal, using its own poisonous essence as a weapon. Nana Ya, who had been watching from the shadows, saw the brass oil and, in his corrupted mind, saw not a curse, but the ultimate prize. He believed the forbidden name he possessed, Nana Bosom, had summoned this terrifying power. Nana Ya, screaming in a high-pitched, manic voice. The quiet wealth. It is mine. The name works. The power is mine. He rushed forward, pushing through the agonizingly burned elders. He scooped up the thick, burning brass oil in his hands and smeared it across his face and neck, trying to absorb the serpent's energy. Nana Ya, his voice cracking, his eyes wide with fevered madness. I will rule the sea. I am the only one who remembered the name. He collapsed, convulsing on the oil-soaked ground, his face seizing up, his mouth locked in a silent, terrifying scream. The serpent had claimed another soul, using his greed and the knowledge of its name to silence him permanently. He became the serpent's second, failed vessel. Chief Odom, watching the body of Nana Ya and the brass oil burning on the sacred ground, knew that the god was not merely punishing them, it was making a terrifying demand. The collective silence had cost them the river, the child, and the sanity of their best men. The chief, his spirit broken, ordered the council to be silent. He had seen enough. He knew the price could only be paid by the man who initiated the debt. The time for trials was over. Abeiku was summoned for the final, absolute spiritual judgment. The sun was a malevolent eye in the sky, beating down on the dust and the foul, brass-colored oil left by the Nana bosom's rejection. The air was silent, heavy, and thick with communal despair. Ekon had seen the proof, the spirits were real, and they were angry. Abeiku was brought before the assembled elders and Chief Odom, not as a wealthy man for trial, but as a condemned vessel for judgment. He was humbled now, not by poverty, but by the sight of the dying village and the horror of the brass-oiled earth. He knew his silent lie had caused this. His own son, Kwaku, lay in a hut, chilled and scaled, a terrifying monument to his greed. Chief Odom, an old man whose face was etched with generations of wisdom and now, deep sorrow, did not shout. His voice was quiet, weary, and heavier than any hammer blow. Abeiku. Look upon the land you have killed. Look upon the oil that burns the feet of your elders. Look upon the madness of Nana Ya, who is chained and weeping dust. The spirits have spoken, and their judgment is absolute, Chief Odom said. Abeiku sank to his knees, unable to meet the chief's gaze. The Nana bosom does not seek revenge, Abeiku. He seeks only one thing. Remembrance. When you took the gold, you made a pact of silence. You promised the god you would never speak his name, thereby condemning him to be forgotten forever by the loud world. Your personal ambition enforced the god's wish for absolute historical erasure. The chief lifted a small, carved wooden dish filled with a clear liquid, the sacred, purifying water, drawn from the deepest, hidden reserve. The drought is the consequence of Econ collectively forgetting the source of its heritage. The only way to save Econ is to create an eternal memory, a vessel dedicated to the Nana Bosom's history. The river god demands a mouth to speak his name again and recount his history daily, forever, so the water may flow. The chief's gaze settled on Abeiku, cold and absolute. You, Abeiku, will become the shaman of the Nana Bosom. You will speak the forbidden name, and the river will live. But the price is this, and you will understand why. To become the pure, eternal memory of the god, you must first purge all your human memory. You must forget your father's lullaby, forget the fisherman's handshake, forget your shame, and most painfully, you must forget your love for Akua and your history with your son, Kwaku. All that makes you Abeiku must be destroyed, to make way for the god's eternal truth. The demand was crushing. To live as the savior, but to exist as a ghost. Abeiku's heart, though already hollowed out by the curse, felt one final, devastating pang of fear. He looked toward his hut, where Akua stood silently, clutching the blue beads of their forgotten love. He saw her pain, and in that moment, he knew he still loved her, a knowledge that was about to be violently erased. Abeiku rose slowly. His mind, already ravaged by the selective forgetting of the curse, felt this final demand like a physical assault. He had lost the names of things, but he still held the feeling of love, the sense of his past. Now, even the feeling had to go. He stumbled toward Akua. She did not speak. She simply held out the blue beads, the symbol of their deepest, shared love, not as a gift, but as a testament to the history he was about to obliterate. Akua, I remember the feeling of buying these for you. I remember the moment. It is the last light in my head. If I drink this, I will look at you, and you will be a stranger. I will save this village, but I will kill the only thing that ever mattered, the memory of your love. He said, gathering his final thoughts. He gently touched the blue beads, a final, agonizing acknowledgement of the man he was. He knew that for Econ to live, Abeiku had to die. He turned and walked back toward the chief, who held the purification bowl steady. I accept the debt. For the life of Econ. These were his final clear words as a man. He took the bowl and raised it to his lips. The water was clear, but cold, impossibly cold, tasting of ancient earth and the metallic brine of the serpent's power. He drank it in one bitter gulp. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. Abeiku didn't simply fall asleep. He fell, writhing, onto the brass-oiled ground. His final, fleeting memories were ripped from him, not gently, but with a visceral, tearing violence. He felt the cold shock of the river pebble hitting the Atlantic, gone. He felt the touch of Akua's hand on his face, gone. He saw the face of his father, the face he had struggled to remember. It flashed in his mind, then dissolved into pure white light. He lost the sound of his mother's lullaby, the meaning of the word Thursday, and the specific, joyous sound of Akua's laugh. He screamed, a long, tearing sound of a soul being gutted. The memory was torn out, leaving his mind an immaculate, empty slate, purged of all personal history. When the convulsion subsided, a profound silence fell over Econ. Abeiku rose. His eyes were clear, serene, but utterly empty, the eyes of a man who has never known love, loss, or self. He was a perfect, neutral vessel. The man was gone. He was wearing the white cloth of the shaman. He walked to the dry, cracked riverbed. His voice, deep, resonant, and not quite his own, was the voice of pure, eternal memory. The water god demands his name. We speak the name of the forgotten source. We speak the name, Nana Bosom. The shaman began, speaking frantically. The moment the forbidden name was spoken, a powerful tremor hit the ground. It was followed instantly by the deep, glorious sound of rushing water. The Nana Bosom returned. Sweet, powerful, and full of life, the water surged into the cracked riverbed, flooding the basin, washing away the foul, brass-colored oil, and drowning the silent screams of the earth. The drought was over. The water was a miracle. But for Acua, the sight of the rushing river brought no joy. It brought only a profound, devastating grief. She had her home, but she had lost her husband. She approached the new shaman, who stood by the bank, his empty eyes gazing at the flowing water. She held out the blue beads, the final token. Acua, her voice thick with tears. Abeiku. Do you remember these? The shaman looked at the beads. He smiled, a kind, serene, empty smile, the smile of a stranger. They are beautiful stones, traveler. They are the color of the deep sea. The river is alive. He said. He spoke not with cruelty, but with the profound neutrality of a being who has never known the concept of US or history. He was a god's voice, divorced from human love. Acua wept. She had to live alongside this stranger who wore the face of her husband. She cared for him, fed him, and listened to his resonant chants of the Nana Bosom's history, but she was a widow in her own marriage. But her trial was not over. Their son, Kwaku, still carried the serpent's mark. His skin remained cold, covered in the metallic scales. Old Kojo, approaching Acua, his eyes filled with sorrow. The river lives, but the debt on the child is personal, Acua. The mark remains because the memory that created the debt is still alive. The memory of your love for the man Abeiku must be purged, just as his memory was purged, for the mark to fade. Acua looked at her child, cold, scaled, fading, and then at the shaman, who was chanting softly at the river's edge. Her personal love, the only thing she had left, was now an active threat to her son's life. It was the final, devastating, agonizing price of the Nana Bosom. She had to choose between the life of her son and the last remaining fragment of her soul, the memory of the man she had loved. She had to kill her own history. Acua stood at the river's edge, the sweet, rushing water of the restored Nana Bosom flowing past her feet. The river lived. The village was saved. But the price remained, a debt of memory, paid in blood and love. She looked at her son, Kwaku, who lay cradled in the arms of Mame Esi, the blind diviner. Kwaku's skin was still cold, still mottled with the faint, brass-colored scales. The child was fading, the lingering curse was draining his life, a final, malignant piece of the serpent's power refusing to release its hold. Then, she looked at the shaman, who was once her husband, Abeiku. He stood nearby, his white robe spotless, his face serene. He watched the water flow with perfect, empty concentration. He was physically present, a vessel of life for the community, but the man she loved was dead. To him, she was merely a traveler. She realized, with a horrifying clarity, the true nature of the final debt, exactly as old Kojo had explained. The curse was created by the memory of greed and the memory of silence. Abeiku had purged his greed and his silence. But Acua still held the memory of the lie. Her deep, enduring love for Abeiku, her history with him, was the last living connection to the selfish ambition that drove him to the pool. Her love, paradoxically, was the remaining piece of the curse. She knelt beside Mame Esi. Akua, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with a terrible resolve. Mame Esi, tell me again. If I keep the memory of Abeiku, of the blue beads, of the sound of his laugh, of the words he spoke, Kwaku will surely die. Mame Esi, her sightless eyes turned toward the river. Child, the Nana Bosom demands a complete cleansing of the root. Your love, your memory, is the last root of the debt. It must be released to the current. You must choose between the life of your son and the memory of the man you lost. Acua closed her eyes. She did not cry. The tears were finished. She needed strength, not the false strength of the sea's loudness, but the quiet, terrible strength of a mother. She opened her eyes and looked at the shaman one last time. She did not seek his recognition, she sought his permission to forget him. He continued to gaze at the river, silent, empty. Acua pulled the blue beads from the neck of her robe. They were cold and smooth in her hand, the last tangible link to the man who was gone. She felt the fierce, joyful memory of him trading his last coins for them, the weight of his love in that single moment. She focused on that specific joy, knowing she was about to annihilate it forever. She rose, walked to the bank, and stood where the water was deepest and swiftest. Acua, whispering to the rushing river, her voice a fragile sound against the water's roar, "Oh, Nana bosom, I give you the final payment. I give you the last piece of the debt. I give you the memory of my love, my history, and myself." With a trembling hand, she released the blue beads. They sank into the sweet, powerful current, vanishing instantly into the water that had once been the black pool. The moment the beads disappeared, the physical effect was immediate and profound. Acua felt a terrible, sharp wrench, not in her heart, but in the center of her mind, a searing, cold violence, like the final cord being severed. The world shimmered. The image of the man before her blurred. The memories of Abeiku, his voice, his laugh, his scent, the reason for the tears she had cried, were violently erased, leaving her mind as serenely empty as his own. She stood there, breathing. The woman who had loved Abeiku was gone. The shaman turned toward her, attracted by the sudden shift in the river's sound. He saw a woman standing by the bank. "Shaman, Abeiku, the water is sweet, traveler. It is good." "Yes, shaman. The water is sweet." Her voice was calm, steady, and utterly neutral. The memory was gone, but the discipline of her heart remained. At the same instant, Mame Esi cried out. Kwaku's skin had flushed warm. The scales faded instantly, dissolving like mist in the sun. He opened his eyes and cried a healthy, normal cry. The child was saved. Acua walked to her son, picked him up, and held him close. She had saved his life, but she lived without the memory of the man she had sacrificed everything for. She would care for the shaman, the vessel of Ikon's salvation, and she would raise her son, the living proof of the ultimate price. She was a woman who knew she had loved a man she could no longer remember. Friends, the price is paid. Acua chose life over love, the future of her son over the memory of her past. If this profound sacrifice moved you, please share this video and leave a comment acknowledging Acua's strength. She is the true hero of Ikon. The life of Ikon returned, but it was a life fundamentally changed. The drought was over. The Nana bosom flowed strong and sweet, ensuring the perpetual health of the village. The spiritual balance was restored. But Ikon never forgot the price. The village became a place dedicated to remembrance. Every child learned the history of the Nana bosom, taught by the shaman, Abeiku, whose voice was deep and resonant, holding the collective truth. The shaman lived in a small, simple hut by the river's confluence. He performed the daily ritual of the name, chanting the history of the river god, ensuring the water never ceased to flow. He lived with Acua and Kwaku, but their existence was a quiet, solemn vigil. Acua, though robbed of her personal history, raised her son in the new tradition. She watched the shaman tend the river, and though she felt no spark of recognition, she felt a profound, peaceful duty toward the man who had traded his soul for her community. She was the widow of memory, living in the shadow of the sacrifice. Kwaku grew up strong, with skin that was warm and healthy. He knew the shaman was his father, but also the voice of the god. Kwaku learned the history of the Nana bosom from the shaman, and he learned the discipline of silence and patience from his mother. The community learned that prosperity is not a pardon for neglect. The sea continued to bring wealth, but now, every fisherman laid a portion of his catch on the banks of the Nana bosom before sailing out. They had learned that the loud must always pay respect to the quiet. Nanayo remained chained, weeping dust, a perpetual warning against greed and envy. Kofi remained buried, his body a grave for the cursed nugget. The final lesson was etched not in stone, but in the flowing water of the Nana bosom. The price of the sea's quick coin is the death of the river's slow memory. Live with discipline, honor your heritage, and never forget the source of your blessings, lest the silence claim you. This long, profound saga of Abeiku and Akua ends here, but the lessons of the Nana bosom flow forever. If this story touched your soul and taught you the importance of remembering your heritage, please share this story, like this video, and make sure to subscribe to keep the powerful wisdom of our people flowing. May the spirit of the ancestors be with you.